Biomed, Nexus. Daily updates, your essential biotech, medtech, and pharma recap. No noise, just what matters. TLDR Sionna Therapeutics discontinued Sionna 719 as an add-on to Trikafta after its Phase 2A trial showed a placebo-adjusted sweat chloride change of -1 mmol L ppf07. Market reports put the one-day share decline at roughly 92%. Tenax Therapeutics Phase 3 level trial of oral levosimendan missed its primary endpoint in PH-HFpF with a 3-5-meter walk distance difference versus placebo p-0 63. The company plans a Type C meeting with the FDA. Silence Therapeutics Divesiran hit its primary endpoint in polycythemia vera with an 88% response rate versus 19% for placebo p-0 in the Phase 2 Sanrico trial. Phase 3 is planned for the first half of 2027. Takeda and protagonists rusfertide, the rival hepcidin therapy in the same disease, has an FDA decision due this quarter under priority review. Grail's Gallery test goes before an FDA advisory panel on September 23rd, the first multi-cancer early detection test to reach a panel with a completed pre-market approval application. Biospace reported BMS's Cobenfy is struggling to gain commercial traction in schizophrenia as MapLight advances a rival muscarinic program. Executive takeaway yesterday, we wrote that capital is moving from pipeline to plumbing. Today, the market demonstrated why on schedule. Sionna Therapeutics looked like the textbook of a de-risked biotech, a clinical stage company in a validated field aimed at what that field considers the root defect in cystic fibrosis, holding more than $250 million in cash. One 15-patient crossover readout erased roughly 9/10 of its equity value in an afternoon. Tenax lost a Phase 3 the same day. Silence won a Phase 2 the same day. 3 readouts, 3 violent repricings, 1 session. The transferable point is that in drug development, risk does not amortize as a company matures. It concentrates into readout days. The de-risk label describes stage, not risk, because a single asset thesis stays binary no matter how late it gets. That distinction is what the infrastructure buyers we covered Monday are paying to escape, and it looks more rational every time the market has a day like this one. We close that loop Friday. Read Full Analysis Clinical Readouts. The most watched outside challenge to Vertex's cystic fibrosis franchise ended in one afternoon. Sionna Sionna Therapeutics reported that Sionna 719, its NBD1 stabilizer, produced no meaningful sweat chloride reduction as an add-on to Trikafta, with a placebo-adjusted change of -1 mmol L ppf07 in the 15-patient Precision CF crossover trial. The company discontinued the add-on program and will prioritize its Sionna 451 plus Sionna 2222 dual combination, which cleared a 120-subject Phase 1. Market reports put the one-day share decline at roughly 92% against $268.3 million in quarter-end cash. The central question, whether stabilizing NBD1 adds benefit on top of triple therapy, remains unanswered in patients. Oral levosimendan missed its Phase 3, and the subgroups will keep the argument alive. Tenax Therapeutics level trial in pulmonary hypertension with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction showed a 3-5-meter difference on 6-minute walk distance p-0 63 across 241 randomized patients, and the key symptom score was flat. Pre-specified subgroups of sicker and older patients improved by more than 26 meters, and NT-proBNP fell 49% versus placebo. Tenax will take a population enrichment strategy to a Type C meeting with the FDA. Subgroup wins inside a failed trial generate hypotheses, not approvals, and regulators will want the enriched population tested prospectively. RNA Therapeutics, RNA interference, just posted the strongest randomized data yet in polycythemia vera. SLN, Taxilence, Therapeutics, Divesiran, an siRNA that raises the body's own hepcidin to curb red blood cell overproduction, delivered an 88% response rate versus 19% for placebo, p0.001, in the 48-patient Sanrico trial, cutting phlebotomies from 1 per patient, to 0, 2 with dosing as infrequent as every 12 weeks. Phase 3 is planned for the first half of 2027. The tension is timing. Takeda and Protagonist's rusfertide, a hepcidin mimetic peptide built on the same biology, is under FDA priority review with a decision due this quarter, which would give it years of head start in the market Sionna wants. Diagnostics. The first multi-cancer blood test gets its day before an FDA panel on September 23rd. Grail, the FDA's molecular and clinical genetics panel, will review Grail's pre-market approval application for the Gallery test on September 23rd, resting on Pathfinder 2, data from 25,490 participants with a year of follow-up, plus more than 7,000 participants from the NHS Gallery screening round in the United Kingdom. Gallery reads methylation patterns in blood to flag cancers before symptoms and predict where they started. A multi-cancer early detection test has never been through a PMA panel before, so the evidence bar this meeting sets becomes the template for the whole category. Quick hits. Radiopharma's Precision Promise is running into toxicity problems in the clinic, per stat reporting, a caveat worth holding against the sector's infrastructure moment. Biogen's targeted ALS therapy is reversing decline in some patients, per a biospace feature on the program's expanding evidence. Psychedelics are approaching a market breakthrough as clinical and policy support build, Biospace reports. 5 biotech IPOs remain queued to price this week, the running test of whether the reopened window holds through August. In today's full analysis, be sure to read the full article for all the details, including the full precision CF and level data tables, including the pre-specified subgroup results, the Sionna versus rusfertide, head-to-head comparison in polycythemia, Vera, the Gallery, PMA timeline and what the September 23rd panel will actually weigh, a 14-question FAQ across all 4 stories, read the full breakdown, Biomed Nexus Pro, private, paid, members only. In today's Pro Brief, the checklist for spotting binary risk, hiding inside a de-risked story, and the one question Sionna's holders needed to ask before yesterday, how the polycythemia vera market splits between a peptide with a decision this quarter and an siRNA dosed 4 times a year. What Grail's September 23rd panel decides for everyone building blood-based cancer screening before a single vote is cast, plus the catalysts to watch into Friday's full calendar upgrade to unlock institutional analysis, Biomed Nexus Pro. Institutional Intelligence Brief. What Sionna breaks about the de-risked label. The most expensive phrase in biotech right now is de-risked, and Sionna just showed why. Roughly 2/3 of first-half venture rounds went to companies already in human testing. The reopened IPO window admits clinical stage stories almost exclusively, and the whole late-stage end of the barbell is priced on the premise that clinical stage means safer. Yesterday, a clinical stage company in one of the most validated fields in drug development lost roughly 9/10 of its value on a 15-patient readout. The mistake is conflating 2 different risks. Execution risk genuinely falls as a company matures. Manufacturing, trial operations, and regulatory navigation all get more predictable with stage. Hypothesis risk does not fall with stage at all. It sits untouched until the specific experiment that tests it reads out. Sionna's hypothesis that stabilizing NBD1 adds clinical benefit on top of Trikafta had never been tested in patients on the standard of care until this trial. Everything else about the company was mature. The thesis was not. The checklist that follows is short. Ask what the company's central hypothesis is. Ask whether it has been tested in the population that matters, on the background therapy that matters. Ask how much of the valuation survives if that one experiment fails. For a genuine platform, the answer can be plenty. For a single mechanism company, the honest answer is usually very little, whatever the stage. Sionna traded like a platform, but every asset in its pipeline leans on the same NBD1 thesis, which is why the repricing was total rather than partial. The design details matter for the autopsy. A 15-patient crossover measuring sweat chloride with the measurement variability and trikafta exposure differences Sionna itself flagged as confounders is a noisy instrument for detecting an incremental effect on top of a highly effective baseline. The mechanism may still have life in the dual combination where it is not fighting trikafta's ceiling, but the market does not pay for May, and the burden of proof just moved from one readout to an entire development program. The read, "This strengthens Monday's thesis rather than complicating it. Infrastructure assets get paid whichever hypothesis wins. Single asset developers concentrate their entire value into readout days. When premiums like Curium's bid for Lantheus look expensive, days like yesterday are the other side of the ledger, and they are why that capital keeps choosing the layer beneath the drugs." We close that loop. Friday. The coming fight for polycythemia. Vera-2 therapies built on the same biology are now on a collision course in polycythemia vera, and the shape of the fight is set. Rusfertide, the Takeda and Protagonist hepcidin mimetic peptide, met its primary and all four key secondary endpoints in the 293-patient Verify Phase 3 and sits under FDA priority review with a decision due this quarter. Divesiran, Silence's siRNA, just posted an 88% response rate against 19 for placebo in Phase 2, with dosing as infrequent as every 12 weeks, and starts Phase 3 in the first half of 2027. Rusfertide's advantages are structural. It will almost certainly be first by years. It arrives with a complete Phase 3 dataset, a large commercial organization behind it, and the chance to define pricing, payer expectations, and physician habit before a competitor exists. Polycythemia vera is a chronic disease managed by hematologists over decades, and in chronic specialty markets, incumbency compounds. The first drug that lets a phlebotomy-dependent patient stop showing up for blood draws will own that patient's loyalty and that physician's default. Silence's counter is cadence. 4 to 8 subcutaneous injections a year against a frequently administered peptide is not a soft benefit in a decades-long disease. It shows up in adherence, in real-world hematocrit control, and in how patients feel about their treatment. The Phase 2 safety profile, self-limiting injection site reactions and 2 cases of grade 1 anemia, gives the argument room to run. The risk is time. A Phase 3 starting in the first half of 2027 reads out years after rusfertide has set the standard, and a best-in-class claim will have to beat not placebo, but an entrenched incumbent's real-world track record. What to watch? First, the rusfertide decision this quarter and how broad the label is. Second, the Divesiran Phase 3 design when it posts, because the endpoint and comparator choices will reveal how aggressive Silence intends to be. Third, whether Takeda responds to the dosing gap with longer interval formulation, work of its own, closing the one advantage the challenger holds before it ever matters commercially. Gallery and the rulebook for blood-based screening. September 23 is now the most important date on the diagnostics calendar. The FDA's Molecular and Clinical Genetics Panel will take up Grail's pre-market approval application for Gallery, the first time a multi-cancer early detection test reaches a panel with a completed PMA. Grail brings Pathfinder 2 with 25 P490 consented participants and a year of follow-up, plus more than 7,000 participants from the prevalent screening round of the NHS Gallery trial. What the panel actually decides is bigger than Grail. It sets the evidence standard for the category, whether detection performance and downstream workup outcomes are enough for approval, or whether blood-based screening needs stage shift or mortality evidence first. It decides how to weigh false positives and incidental workups at population scale, where even small rates become large absolute numbers. Every developer behind Grail will read the transcript as a specification sheet, because that is what it will be. The risk runs both ways. A hard evidence bar delays the category for years, but makes the first approval durable and, eventually, reimbursable. A soft bar accelerates approval and invites the backlash screening has suffered before when real-world positive, predictive value disappoints clinicians. Grail Chief Executive Josh Ofman's framing that 70 to 80% of cancer deaths come from cancers with no recommended screening at all is the argument for tolerating uncertainty. The panel's job is to price that uncertainty in public, keep the finish line in view. FDA approval is not coverage, and screening adoption follows guideline bodies, not labels, so even a clean approval starts a second campaign rather than ending the first. The date to hold is September 23rd, and the output worth reading is not the vote count but the questions, because the questions are the rulebook. Coming catalysts: Capricor's Duramiocel PDUFA is August 22nd after a negative AdCom. Rusfertide's FDA decision in polycythemia, Vera, is due this quarter. 5 biotech IPOs are expected to price this week. Grail's gallery panel is September 23rd. The full Catalyst calendar returns Friday. 2 binary blowups and 1 clean win in a single session is the sharpest illustration yet of why last week's biggest checks went to plumbing instead of pipeline. We pull that thread through Friday. What are you watching? Reply to this email. Visit the Pro Hub Read. Full article sponsorship. Slots for 2026 are limited. See packages and pricing. New Biomed Nexus signals weekly sales intelligence for life sciences BD teams. Learn more